that can be explained as the kind of technology they're using, which is gravity control. It's artificial gravity. So when you're inside of a gravitational field that you're creating yourself around your craft, the gravity of the Earth doesn't have a force on you.
But although aircraft propulsion by means of gravity manipulation is beyond the limits of current technology, many scientists claim it is theoretically possible. In Davis, California, inventor Dr. Paul Mahler tests the boundaries of real-life science with a recreational flying vehicle called the New Era.
The New Era is a very simple device to fly. It has 8 lifting ducted fans, as we call them, each one driven by its own engine. Well, one of the big advantages in this kind of round shape is that you end up with the strength in the skin of the vehicle itself, much like the shell of a beetle. And that gets you a very, very strong design. This airframes you see over here next to this vehicle, which are similar to this, weigh only 75 pounds apiece, which is incredible. You got a complete airframe that's capable of lifting 1,500 pounds with a 75-pound shell.
But could the inherent design strength of a disc-shaped object be the key to overcoming the forces of gravity? And does the prevalence of flying saucer sightings suggest a connection between anti-gravity technology and extraterrestrial visitations?
Gravity is one of the most unknown forces in physics today. And when we do understand it, we'll be able to find out a way to shield ourselves from it or to provide a device, a method, electromagnetically, with some much greater knowledge than we have today, where we eliminate it within the vehicle's operations.
Although anti-gravity devices in the form of flying saucers may help to explain how extraterrestrials might be able to travel at ultra-high speeds, there is in fact another means of interplanetary transportation, and it is one that humans, and perhaps aliens, have been using for centuries: the brute force of rockets. Merritt Island, Florida, the Kennedy Space Center. 6 Earth astronauts sit atop NASA's Endeavour space shuttle, headed for orbit. After countdown, 3 main engines, together with 2 solid rocket boosters, provide the thrust to lift the orbiter off the ground. Oops. I urge everyone to be part one day of a rocket launch because it is a life-altering moment. When you stand there, a few miles away, you can still feel the power as that rocket takes off into space. Grumbling in your stomach, the vibrations, and you can hear the noise. And it's a truly magnificent sight and awe-inspiring. But are manned spaceflights really a recent phenomenon? Or could our ancient ancestors have witnessed similar events?
There's no doubt that if we thoroughly investigate this planet, they will find that this planet may have already been to the moon way before we went to the moon with a man in 1969.
The interesting thing is that we have the exact same descriptions in ancient texts and also in oral traditions, where whenever those quote-unquote gods appeared, there was a lot of smoke, a lot of fire, a lot of noise, and the trembling of the ground. Rockets take off with the stand back and get out of the way. And that's a lot of what the ancient legends are about too. The gods came and went, may well have been just these rockets or other aerospace vehicles landing and taking off and making a lot of smoke and noise. But could early man really have had knowledge of rocket technology. To meet the case, ancient astronaut theorists point to numerous and consistent descriptions of rockets found throughout many cultures of the ancient world.
When you're dealing with this subject and you look at the ancient literature, you have to look at it through the lens of how is it being experienced by a civilization with no foundation of understanding the science, the technology. And so I think in ancient times there were people who had encounters, and however, I think the way they might have been reported would have been in metaphors, in ways that would have made sense to them.
In China, you have these stories of dragons flying through the air. They make a lot of noise, and smoke comes out of them, and fire, just like a rocket.
The first emperor of China descended in a fiery dragon with smoke and fire, and whenever that dragon appeared, the earth was quaking, and everyone was afraid and sticking themselves to the ground. Now, of course, it wasn't a dragon in a biological nature, a living being, but it was a misinterpreted machine.
If you look at the Greek gods, they were all described as flying in on chariots of fire. Well, chariot of fire to me seems very clearly like it's some sort of rocket, probably burning its retros as it lands somewhere in ancient Greece.
In the Old Testament, we can read about a glowing furnace that descended from the sky. And sometimes this glowing furnace is described as a chariot of fire or as the glory of the Lord. So there are all these different descriptions which in the ancient astronaut opinion describe ancient rocketry. From 5000 to 2000 BC, southern Mesopotamia was home to the Sumerians, a highly advanced civilization considered to be among the first astronomers. Regarded as one of the oldest written stories in history, the Epic of Gilgamesh told of a man's journey to the heavens to meet the god Anu.
The Gilgamesh epic, which goes back to the Sumerian. That's a piece where the hero Gilgamesh flies over the earth. And he describes how the earth looks from above. Fascinating. An old story of the first flight. The most ancient civilization that we have on record, the Sumerian culture, has left us evidence of what's called a shem. And this object looks very similar to a modern-day space capsule that we place on top of a rocket. And this shem is where priests would go into the shem to interact with the gods, or anytime man was ascending or descending into heaven. So it's a very interesting term used from a culture dating back to 3800 BC and very clearly matches the descriptions of a modern-day rocket.
Could early man have actually possessed a surprisingly sophisticated understanding of what we now call rocket propulsion? In the 1st century AD, nearly 2,000 years before the Industrial Revolution, a Greek mathematician and engineer named Hero created a steam-powered engine he called an olopile.
One of the great inventors of the ancient world was the famous Hero of Alexandria. He invented all kinds of stuff. He actually invented what we would describe as a rocket-type motor. And really, something like this is the beginnings of rocket technology. And we don't know where Hero got many of his ideas, but may well have come from aliens.
John Robert Tyndall, founder of Tyndall Vision Laboratories, demonstrates a small-scale replica of Hero's olopile.
A conventional steam engine that we think of has pistons that is covered. Olopile uses these opposing jets, so it's creating thrust. And rather than thrust in like a rocket would use it in a linear fashion, this is causing a rotational effect. And there's your steam turbine really working on the thrust. Now this is operating much as it did
1st century AD. This is generally considered to be the first working steam engine. It works more like a turbine than a classic steam engine with pistons. But it's very significant because it really is taking a compressed gas and turning it into energy.
Wow, that has a lot of energy. Steam.
The name for Hero's steam rocket engine, Aeolipile, translates to the ball of Aeolus. In Greek mythology, Aeolus was the god of the winds. Is it possible that Hero drew inspiration for his invention from the stories of the gods, such as those found in Homer's The Odyssey? Or might he have had help from the gods themselves? Some have suggested that it was alien intervention, that aliens taught him how to build this machine. However, I'm leaning more towards the idea that he looked at older texts from previous generations and that the source of the idea of how to build this did come from extraterrestrials, but from way before he was alive, and he just came across those texts. But do the descriptions of rockets and otherworldly devices found in ancient texts and legends provide evidence of extraterrestrial encounters in the distant past? Perhaps the answer will be discovered in an unlikely place, in the hands of the U.S. military. May 2010, off the coast of California. A powerful new weapon shoots down unmanned aerial drones during secret testing carried out by the U.S. Navy. Firing from a warship at a distance of nearly 2 miles, a ray of intense laser energy burns through targets traveling at speeds of more than 300 miles per hour. But is it possible that such so-called death rays could have been used before, perhaps in ancient times?
I'm quite convinced that there have been in the past advanced civilizations on Earth that did have such things as the so-called death ray. Whether it was used as a weapon or whether it was just observed being used is a very, very open question.
In 214 BC, Greeks living in the Sicilian city of Syracuse prepared for an attack by a fleet of Roman warships. Though outnumbered by a superior military force, ancient texts suggest that Syracuse was well defended by a mysterious and powerful new weapon.
Probably the most famous ancient death ray was the one that was built by the Greek inventor Archimedes. He was able to create this giant mirror and parabolic disc and focus the sun's rays on the fleet and set these ships on fire. So here we have what would be a primitive kind of death ray that really worked.
But how could Archimedes have conceived such a formidable weapon, one far in advance of any known at the time? Researchers suggest the inventor may have drawn inspiration from Greek myths written nearly 600 years before the Battle of Syracuse. Myths that told the stories of gods that brandished cosmic weapons of incredible destructive force.
If you look in the Greek tradition, they have a very clear description of Zeus's thunderbolt, which he was able to point at people or at other things that he wanted to explode, hit the button, and what they described as lightning would come out and create a fierce and terrible explosion.
When these ancient gods, like Zeus, were to come down from the sky in this flurry of thunder and lightning and get out of their spacecraft, they were perceived as gods. These ancient aliens had fantastic technology available to them. Technology that would have seemed like magic to our primitive ancestors. So when these people came down from the sky and they had advanced
to create thunder, create lightning in a controlled way. In ancient India, we have the gods holding the dorjes sometimes like this, and it looks as if some type of a directed energy beam comes directly out the front to vanquish the enemy, to destroy him, to incinerate him. But if death ray type weapons had been used in ancient times, might there be some sort of tangible proof? Perhaps there is. Here, scattered throughout the Scottish countryside, can be found numerous ancient ruins. Many appear to have been forts or other enclosures, dating back thousands of years. Remarkably, they also appear to have been subjected to fire and heat, so intense it practically turned the stone structures into glass. It's a process more scientifically known as vitrification.
Here you have these stone buildings in which an analysis of the outside comes to the conclusion that they were heated to over 1,000 degrees Celsius in temperature. Conventional fire could not have reached this heat. You need to sustain the burn at 1,000 degrees Celsius for a long period of time. Why is it that it's only these forts that have this type of charring where they're actually glazed like pottery on the outside? Why is it that you don't see it on the stones in the surrounding area? And even more interestingly, why is it that so many of them are concentrated in this one little area in northern Scotland? I believe this is very clear evidence of death rays being used.
According to Celtic legend, there once was a god named Lu, also known as the Shining One, the sun god, and the god of war. Like the Greek god Zeus, Lu was said to wield a mighty magic spear, not unlike the thunderbolts of his Greek counterpart.
We have many stories of divinities who were powerful figures who had weapons that seemed extraordinary for their time. One was the great Celtic divinity Lu, who had a spear that could spit fire and lightning and do great damage. It was an extraordinary weapon. We don't have a great deal of detail about it, but it clearly could dominate any situation he got into.
When battle was near, Lu would draw out his spear, and it roared, and then flashes of fire came out of it, and it tore through the ranks of the enemy, never tired of killing and slaying. It was one amazing weapon. I mean, how else can we explain all those numerous vitrified forts where the surface of the stone is as smooth as glass? And these spots can only be found in very concentrated areas through northern Scotland.
Is it possible that what the Celtic legends are describing as Lu is in fact an alien general or other kind of extraterrestrial leader in possession of a devastating weapon?
All these descriptions of sophisticated weaponry sounds almost like science fiction, but is it really? Because we have those weapons today. And I think it is merely a reinvention of history. That all this stuff that we have today has been around before, and that our past is not science fiction, but science fact.
Deadly laser beams, acoustic levitation, anti-gravity. Could these be technologies that were witnessed and even used by ancient civilizations? If so, were they conceived in the minds of early man? Or did they have different, perhaps otherworldly origins? Might unlocking the secrets of these inventions be the key to discovering our ancient past? Or by rediscovering lost technology, might we clear the path to our own future and to the limitless potential of the universe beyond?
do me a favor. You take me to bed. Yeah. Kill them.
Winged creatures. Carrying messages from the heavens.
Yeah.
Unearthly guardians. Entrusted to both observe and protect. Powerful warriors. Bringing about everything from plague to peace. But are angels merely the product of mankind's imagination? Or do they really exist? If so, where do they come from?
When angels appear, they begin to do things that defy our laws of physics. I don't think they actually had wings. It was ancient man's way of saying they had the power of flight.
Are angels really supernatural beings from heaven? Or something more?
It's essentially a misinterpreted flesh and blood extraterrestrial who visited Earth a long, long time ago.
Millions of people around the world believe we've been visited in the past by extraterrestrial beings. What if it were true? Did ancient aliens really help to shape our history? If so, might angels really be travelers visiting the Earth from distant planets? Angels. According to a Nielsen survey taken in 2010, nearly 70% of Americans believe in their existence. But what are they? Winged visitors from God as depicted in the Bible? Smiling cherubs who peer down at us from billowing clouds? Or something much, much more?
The concept of wings is obviously very widespread, certainly in American culture, and you find it in Latin culture, Greek culture, Babylonian culture.
When we think of angels, we immediately think to the Bible. But when you go onto the internet, when you read books, you will find that people have visitations of angels every single day.
In the Hebrew Bible's book of Genesis, angels first appear as divine beings, sent to earth as messengers of God.
They wanted to have God interacting with the human beings, but it seems so undignified to have God directly operating, and so he sent messengers.
The word angel is a mistranslation. In Hebrew, the word for angel is malach. However, the correct translation is not angel at all, but it is in fact messenger. In Greek, the word angelos is not angel. It is intermediary, middleman. And so what do we have in these stories? We have these intermediaries, these messengers bringing information from quote-unquote God.
By definition, angels are otherworldly. Angels are extraterrestrial. They're not from this planet. So really, by definition, ETs and angels are the same. Now, our modern conception of ETs have changed, but go back thousands and thousands of years when angels lived among our biblical ancestors. They didn't call them ETs, they called them angels, but they knew they were not of this world, not of this planet.
But could some of these so-called messengers of God have served another function? One not so benevolent or benign. According to the book of Enoch, the so-called lost biblical text
that was rediscovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the late 1940s. The first angels to arrive on Earth were the fallen angels.
It was on Mount Hermon that angels came down from the heavens, fallen angels, to inhabit Earth. They were trying to assume power, and because of that, they were cast out from heaven and cast down to Earth.
Now, to me, this sounds more of a mutiny story, where extraterrestrials arrived here and there was a type of rift, and so they split into two different factions. And the faction that split off is what today is referred to as the fallen angels.
Enoch was a believer in angels, fallen angels, visitations, but everything he put in his scriptures seemed to imply, to me, extraterrestrial visitation. From craft that he saw, to mountainsides that they would land, to them taking him around and telling him things.
Both in the book of Enoch and in the Hebrew Bible, the fallen angels act in direct opposition to God's will by interbreeding with humans.
And leave it on without sound. And just leave the TV on without sound. I will have to help if I'm getting on here today. It's 3 o'clock.
Yep.
That's terrible, I think.
Yeah. You need a chair for him. What did you do?
I see my fish next week.
Yeah, it is. I think it's better to check it now before you go to bed.
I don't know, it's up to you, whichever way you
Yeah,
think
here.
it's easiest. All leaking already. I gotta lift my head on the home. Oh shit. Oh my god, that's bad. I didn't feel that. Yeah, I should have. Don't push the hard, please. Yeah. You need to change your short. Oh, yeah, for a minute now. look at my headset. You know what? There's no tape. What? I don't know. Who worked in the afternoon shift? I don't know. Keep that down? Yeah. That's my wife. That's my wife. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because you came, I don't know. Nobody worked in the afternoon shift? I can find it. I don't think so. That was my wife. Jesus Christ. You know, sometimes my wife will shit on a penny just that you won't see the domination. Like my father. But I'm not saying that too loud. She'll be here, but she gets wild every time I say it. God, for what men used to hate me. Let me get something. My wife just said that question. Oh, it's really different. What is the paper? Or whatever. No. You know, in certain things, my wife is like her father. But I'm not saying that to her. She wouldn't like that. But see, what men used to hate me. Yeah. Oh, did he ever hate me? You know why? Money. Oh my gosh. There was a time when the Germans were afraid that Russia would invade Germany. Yeah. So we sent a nest egg in money to Canada. And invested in, I don't know, anything, properties and so on. Yeah. And my father wanted the same. And I bought a, at that time I bought an apartment building. Yes. With the money he sent. also have to he just send the money over. And asked me to invest it, which I did. Yeah. Because the only way I knew how was an apartment.
Yes.
And
You did well.
yeah, what all I got now is only a fraction that came from him.
I see.
So that's we created in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And, mm, I don't know what I was going to say. No, almost there. Yeah.
That's good enough. Also going to check this please.
Oh,
Okay.
there we go. That's the toilet in there, right? After all, you see, I took the money he sent.